Dear people watching and listening, Assalamu alaikum. Kindly like and share this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Kindly support my channel by contributing to my Patreon account so that I can continue making such audiobooks for you. The Muslim Conquest of Persia by Lieutenant General A.I. Akram. This book tells in detail about the Arab conquest of Persia, also known as the Arab conquest of Iran, during the Rashidun Caliphate from 633 to 654 AD. This conquest brought the fall of the Sassanid Empire, which was in power for over 4 centuries, while rivaling its neighbor, the Eastern Roman Empire of Byzantine. Start of Chapter 17. The Conquest of Tustar. The young emperor of Persia had left Hulwan when the Muslims took Jalola. He traveled eastwards toward Qum, and news was brought to him of the fall, one after the other, of Khaniqin and Qasr Shirin. The emperor wandered. He went to Kashan and then to Isfahan. Everywhere he urged the people to stand boldly against the menace of the invaders from the desert. He wrote to the governors of his provinces and to the nobles of the land to unite for war, to keep up their resistance, and to muster forces not only for the defense of what remained of the empire, but also for an offensive campaign to recover the territories lost to the Muslims. His call was answered with varying degrees of enthusiasm, and Persian subjects began to gather, some in large numbers, others in driblets. And this process went on for 2 years. He was in constant touch with Hormuzan and encouraged him to continue hurting the Muslim state of Iraq and resisting further expansion by the Muslims. He was faced with a difficult decision about timing, whether to delay all action until a powerful military force had been organized, in which case there was the risk that the people would lose faith in him and accept the Muslim presence as a permanent feature, or to keep the war alive by throwing smaller detachments into action as soon as they were ready for war. Not knowing that Umar had no intention of pressing his advantage and conquering more territory, and fearing that the Muslims would soon be on the warpath again, Yazdurd chose the later course. Persian reinforcements moved in small numbers into the region of Ahwaz to strengthen Hormuzan, which led to the actions which have already been described. In spite of the treaty signed by Hormuzan, the Persians had no intention of letting the Muslims remain in peaceful occupation of Iraq. Even after the loss of Ahwaz, the build-up of imperial forces went on in Khuzestan, concentrating mainly at Tustar and Ram Hormuz, from where a two-pronged counter-offensive could be launched against the Muslims at Ahwaz. The emperor also organized, under a one-eyed general named Siyah, an elite body of champions consisting of 300 knights and including 70 noblemen. Siyah was ordered to gather more fighters as he went on and to operate on the Ahwaz front against the Muslims as suited him best. We do not know whether he was required to join Hormuzan or operate independently, but as it happened, he did not report to Hormuzan and instead moved to Kalbania, some distance north of Sus. We shall come back to Siyah shortly. Although stated in clandestine manner, the Persian war preparations could not be concealed from the Muslims. By about the middle of 19 Hijri, which began on January 2nd, 640 AD, It was obvious that serious military action was planned by imperial forces. The picture became clearer as pieces of intelligence coming into Basra were put together by Abu Musa, and no doubt was left in the Muslim mind that the Persians had broken their pledge, at least Hormuzan had, and had used the peace treaty as a means of gaining time to prepare for war. Abu Musa wrote about this to Umar, and the Caliph determined to settle the problem once and for all by taking Khuzestan and inflicting upon Hormuzan the punishment which he deserved for breaking the treaty a second time. Umar decided to concentrate forces from Kufa and Basra for dealing with the Persian threat, and sent instructions to Kufa accordingly. But these instructions were not sent to Saad bin Abi Waqas, because Saad was no longer there. For the reasons of his removal from command, we must go back to 17 Hijri, when Kufa was founded. In the new Kufa, Saad had a large house built for himself, which according to the simple standards of Arabia was like a palace, and so it came to be called the Palace of Saad. It had a door, and this was apparently a departure from the early Arab custom, for the simple people of Mecca and Medina did not usually have doors in their houses, just a curtain against prying eyes, and there was nothing to prevent one from entering the house. So because of his big house and a large wooden door, Saad's men thought that he was living like a lord. Moreover, the palace of Saad was next to the marketplace, whence a great deal of noise arose to disturb Saad's peace, and once or twice Saad tried to stop this noise. Some people were quick to find fault with him, and it was not difficult to turn people against him because of his stern ways. He was a strict man, a hard driver, and every inch a military commander who would not stand any nonsense from anyone. So the people began to complain, and some saw to it that their complaints were brought to the notice of the Caliph. The news of Saad's living in a palace jarred upon Umar's sense of simple, unspoiled living, as Khalid bin Walid's good living in Syria had done shortly before this. He wrote a letter to Saad, gave it to a companion named Muhammad bin Maslama, and sent him to Kufa with the other. Burn down his door and then return. Muhammad bin Maslama got to Kufa, bought some firewood, took it to the palace of Saad, and set fire to the big door. This done, he returned to the house where he had established his quarters. Saad was informed that this apparent act of vandalism was the work of the emissary of the Caliph. He sent for the man, but the man refused to come, and the governor of Kufa had to go himself to the house where Muhammad bin Maslama had put up for his short stay. There the man gave Saad the Caliph's letter, which read, "It has come to my notice that you have built a palace, and use it to live as if in a citadel, and it is known as the Palace of Saad, and you have constructed a door between yourself and the people. It is not a palace but unsoundedness of mind. Come out of it and live in a house next to the treasury, and do not construct a door to prevent people from entering and to deny them their rights. Let them be with you when you sit and when you come out of your house." Muhammad bin Maslama told Saad what was being said against him, and Saad swore that it was not true. Subsequently, Muhammad carried out further investigations and returned to Medina to report to Umar the situation regarding Saad and the people. Umar at once accepted Saad's denial of the charges and asked his emissary if he had also accepted Saad's explanation. Muhammad replied, "If you had wished me to do so, you should have written it for me or instructed me accordingly." Thereupon Umar remarked, The best in judgment is the man who, even if he does not have definite instructions from his master, acts with resolution. After this exchange, Muhammad bin Maslama informed Umar that Saad was regarded as a just and true man and an efficient administrator, whereupon the Caliph observed, "He is more true than what is said about him, and than him who brought me information about him." This happened sometime in 18 Hijri, and nothing more came of the complaints against Saad. Saad remained at his post for about another year. Then, in 19 Hijri, opposition to him began to mount again, and the Kufans, perhaps softened by the good living of Kufa, and wishing to take it easy in the belief that the war was over, began to get restive under his firm rule and his no-nonsense approach to military life. Many started complaining and rumors were set afloat. One complaint related to the way that Saad conducted the congregational prayers, and people said that it was not the right way, but Saad insisted that this was the way that the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself had conducted the prayers. One of the most vociferous of his detractors was a man named Abu Sabra. When Saad came to know about him, he prayed, "O Lord, if what he says be false, prolong his life and his poverty, make him blind in mind, and expose him to misery." The man lived a long life, full of suffering, which included having 10 unmarried daughters, and in later years would lament, "I am in much distress. The curse of Saad has got me." There was something about the curse of Saad bin Abi Waqas, just as there was something about his archery, in which he was unequaled. These gifts had come to him from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who had once prayed, "O Lord, answer his prayer and straighten his bow aim." After that, neither the curse of Saad nor his arrow ever missed its mark. The pressure continued to increase, and eventually the Caliph removed Saad from command, appointing in his place a companion named Amr bin Yasir, who was known for his nearness to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and was highly venerated as a Muslim. Saad's reaction to his dismissal was the following prayer with regard to the Kufans: "O Lord, let no commander be pleased with them, and let them not be pleased with any commander." This was another of Saad's curses, and certainly had effect, as students of Muslim history will know. Amr remained governor at Kufa for 1 year and 9 months before he too was dismissed by the Caliph on account of the complaint of the Kufans. "He is a weak man. He knows nothing about government." When removing Amr from his post, Umar explained in exasperation, "Who will plead for me with the people of Kufa? When I appoint a strong man over them, they tell lies about him, and when I appoint a mild man, they hold him in contempt." Finally, to replace Amr bin Yasir, the Caliph chose Mughira bin Shoba as governor of Kufa, a job for which the man had been angling. He had been detained in Medina by the Caliph ever since the time when he was charged with adultery, and now set out to take command of the region administered from Kufa, at which post he would remain during the rest of Umar's lifetime. So it was to Umar bin Yasir, the new governor of Kufa, that Umar sent instruction, and these were to send Nu'man bin Muqarrin once again with a detachment to help Abu Musa. He also instructed Abu Musa to organize a force from his own province and place it under Sahal bin Adi. Abu Musa would then use the army thus created to deal with all the opposition which the Persians offered in Khuzestan. The Basran force organized by Abu Musa included many companions of high standing, men like Bara bin Malik, Marza'a bin Saur, Arfaja bin Harsama, and Huzaifa bin Mihsan, the last two of whom had been used by Abu Bakr as corps commanders to crush the apostasy in 11 Hijri. The two forces from Kufa and Basra would concentrate at Ahwaz, whence they would operate against the Persians as decided by Abu Musa. Abu Musa had several objectives to capture, the biggest being Tustar, but the main enemy was Hormuzan himself, and he was at Ram Hormuz. As it happened, Norman, marching with the Kufans across the Suwad, got to Ahwaz before Sahel and the Basrans, who were late in getting started, and Abu Musa sent Norman on to deal with Hormuzan. Sahel arrived at Ahwaz soon after Norman had left, and was held back by Abu Musa as a reserve in case the Persians at Tustar advanced against Ahwaz, which was the base from which operations against Ram Hormuz were sustained. It was now about the third quarter of 19 Hijri. Norman arrived at Arbuk and found the Persians arrayed for battle on the east bank of the river. A short, sharp engagement followed in which the Persians were defeated, and Hormuzan, not wishing to be driven back and away from Tustar, abandoned Ram Hormuz to its fate, and with his army marched northwest to Tustar. Upon arrival here, he set about preparations for defense, had the walls of the city repaired, gathered provisions for a long siege, and called upon all local Persians to join battle against the invaders. Norman marched on and occupied Ram Hormuz, which offered no resistance, and then advanced into Hijaz in the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, which was the easternmost district of Khuzestan. Here too everyone submitted to Muslim rule and to the payment of the jizya, and Norman returned to Ram Hormuz and sent a report to Abu Musa about the success of his operation. Abu Musa was not like the abler general who had achieved fame during the war in Iraq before him, Khalid, Mutanna, Saad, nor did he possess the chivalrous dash or brilliancy of the lower-ranking officers like Tuleha, the brothers Asim and Kaka, and the father of the bull. Personally a brave man, he was known mainly as a devout Muslim who had accepted Islam just after the Battle of Khyber in 7 Hijri, and had thereafter served the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam well in peace and war. A small, lean man with a thin beard, he had a fine voice for Quranic recitation. He was from the Yemen. As a general he was sensible and steady, with more caution than boldness, and made certain of every move before undertaking it, in order to reduce the element of risk to the minimum. This was, of course, a sensible way of doing things. When word was brought to him at Ahwaz that Hormuzan had marched to Tustar after his defeat by Norman at Arbuk, and was fortifying the city and preparing it for a siege, he chose to make certain of being in the greatest possible strength for the contest before advancing against the Persians. He asked the Caliph for more reinforcements, and the Caliph sent instructions to Amr bin Yasir to dispatch another detachment from Kufa to augment the strength of Abu Musa's army. Amr dispatched a force of 1,000 men under Jarir bin Abdullah, but soon after, in response to further instructions from Umar, marched himself with half his army, leaving Abdullah bin Mas'ud as his deputy at Kufa. How much half the army amounted to in terms of men is not known. While these moves were underway, Abu Musa received another and unexpected addition to his strength, this time from the Persians. Mention has been made earlier in this chapter of a Persian general named Siyah, who with a force of 300 champions had been sent by Yazdurd to go and fight the Muslims. This force was somewhere north of Tustar, where it just waited and watched when news was received of the defeat of Hormuzan at Arbuk. Siyah at once decided that it was pointless to oppose the Muslims any longer, and the sooner peace was made with them the better. He had a frank discussion with his nobles and they all agreed to end their war with Islam, provided favorable terms were made available to them. In pursuance of this decision, Siyah sent a delegation of 10 nobles to Ahwaz to meet the Muslim governor. The leader of the delegation said to Abu Musa, "We incline to your fate. We are prepared to accept your fate on condition that we fight beside you against Persians, but not against Arabs. If any Arabs fight us, you shall have to defend us. We shall settle down where we wish, and among those of you we like. And you shall give us a fixed pay. And for all this the commander over you must give his assurance." "No," replied Abu Musa, "you shall have what we have and shall carry the same burden as we do." To this the delegation did not agree, and Abu Musa had to refer the matter to Umar. The Caliph was more accommodating than his governor and instructed Abu Musa to accept the terms demanded by the Persians. The delegates returned happily to their comrades, and the entire body of 300 valiant Persians travelled to Ahwaz under their one-eyed general, accepted Islam, and joined the Muslim army. They were to prove to be worth far more than their numbers indicated, for in them Abu Musa found nothing but courage and perseverance in battle after battle. What rate of pay was fixed for them by the governor at this stage is not known. With the arrival of the forces from Kufa, the Muslim army was ready to tackle Hormuzan. Abu Musa sent orders to Norman to move direct from Ram Hormuz to Tustar, and with the rest of his army advanced from Ahwaz. The entire army concentrated southeast of Tustar and went into camp. Hormuzan was fully prepared for battle. He had been joined by a large number of Persians and had stocked the city for a long siege. The stage was set for the Battle of Tustar, started in late 19 Hijri, that is 640 AD. Tustar was another of the great cities believed to have been built by the illustrious Sasani Emperor Sabur. It was and still is known to the Persians as Shustar, meaning a very clean place, but it was Arabicized to Tustar, and since all early Muslim history is in Arabic and refers to the place as Tustar, we too shall use that name. It was a walled city, which made it more difficult to attack or raid, and within the city rose a citadel which acted as the inner core of the defense. Its west edge lay on the river Karun, and the most unusual feature of the place was a canal lined with stone which brought water into the city from the river, and was regarded as a marvel of the time. There were other canals which flowed under the city, and which ran mills just below the city after surfacing. The canals are still there, and there was a stone dam on one branch of the river Karun, which helped in controlling the waters of the river for irrigation. The citadel itself, known as Salasil, which means the chains, was a remarkable piece of engineering. It stood upon the edge of a cliff which rose sheer from the river's edge, and it had a covered stairway dug through the earth like a sloping tunnel to the water's edge. There was also a well, bored down to the water's edge, and a canal supplying the city with water ran through the citadel. Its water supply assured, its northwestern face resting on the Karun, it was only vulnerable on its southeastern side. But here the city had the normal protection of a city wall with battlements, etc., and could only be taken by storm. And to further strengthen the defenses of the city, Hormuzan had a ditch dug outside the wall along the exposed southern arc, the part not protected by the river, and had it covered by Persian posts located between it and the wall. Tustar was for all purposes unassailable and unconquerable. The first action which followed the arrival of the Muslims was a set-piece engagement outside the city. Hormuzan felt strong enough to fight in the open, and rightly thought that if he defeated the Muslims in a regular battle before they could invest the city, he would not have to be locked up within it. Both sides lined upon the plain southeast of Tustar, and in the fierce battle that followed the Persians were defeated and forced to withdraw behind the safety of the ditch and the wall. Abu Musa then placed several detachments around the city, and all avenues of access and escape were blocked. What followed was a siege which lasted several months into 20 Hijri. It was an active siege with the Persians making scores of sallies to break the grip of the Muslims, and the Muslims making scores of attacks to cross the ditch and get into the city. There was some very severe fighting and heavy casualties were taken by both sides, but neither could claim success. After some months of this sort of fighting, the Persians made one last desperate sally, which led to the hardest fighting of the siege, but they were again defeated, and the Muslims were able to follow at their heels and cross the ditch before the Persians could do anything about it. The Persians got back into the city but lost the obstacle of the ditch, and the Muslims closed up to the wall from all directions, putting the ditch behind them. Within the city morale sagged, as happens in such situations when food runs short and the spectre of famine raises its ugly head, and when little hope of victory is left against an army which has swept all before it. Hormuzan was determined to fight on for as long as possible, for he knew that he would be given no quarter because of his breach of faith a second time, but many local inhabitants wished for nothing but peace. One such was a Persian named Sina. During the night, shortly after the last abortive sally by the Persians, he slipped out of the city, came to the Muslims, and asked to see their commander. When he was brought before Abu Musa, he said that he would show the Muslims a way into the city, which would lead to its quick capture, if they would spare him and his family and give him a fixed pension for the rest of his life. Abu Musa accepted the terms. Then he asked for volunteers who would go and see the way. Many offered themselves for the dangerous task, and of them one named Ashras bin Auf was selected. Ashras and the Persians set off from the Muslim camp to the west side of the city by the bank of the Karun, where a large sewer discharged water into the river. It was like a tunnel lined with stone. The two entered the sewer and advanced through it, finally emerging at the inner end. Just near this end was the house of Sina, and he took the Muslim inside, dressed him in Persian clothes, and then brought him out again. The Persian led the Muslim around the city to show him the entire perimeter of the wall from the inside, and the position of the various gates. While they were going around, they even passed Hormuzan, and the Persian generally actually looked at the two men, but could not guess that one of them was an enemy within the fort. At last the Persian led Ashras back into the sewer, and out of it, and into the Muslim camp. The way in was now known. The attack was planned for the following night. 40 men were selected as the first group to go in, and another 200 as the group to follow close upon the heels of the first. The second group would join the first as soon as the signal for battle was given, and the remainder of the army, previously positioned by the gate nearest the sewer, would storm the city as soon as the gate was opened by the first group. And this is how the operation was conducted. Complete secrecy was maintained, and the Persians had no knowledge of the blow which was about to befall them, until 40 brave warriors emerged from the sewer, and cries of Allahu Akbar fell upon the Persian guard at the gate. In no time the soldiers of the guard were killed, and the lock and chain that secured the gate broken. Persian units rushed towards the gate but were held off by the second group of 200 men, which had emerged from the sewer, and at the same time the main body of the Muslim army began to pour into the city through the open gate. The last phase of the battle was the bloodiest of all. Hormuzan himself led the struggle and fought ferociously to stem the tide and bottle up the Muslims in the narrow streets in the immediate vicinity of the gate. In the savage contest which followed, large numbers of Persians fell and Muslim casualties also began to mount. Hormuzan himself killed two noble companions, Bara bin Malik and Majza bin Saur. Many proud Persians, despairing of an honorable survival, killed their wives and children to prevent them from falling into Muslim hands and living the rest of their lives in slavery. But nothing could stop the Muslim advance. At last the weary Persians gave up and retired to other parts of the city, from where many thousands made a fast exit and fled to Sus. Hormuzan, with a picked group of warriors, withdrew hastily into the citadel where he resolved to sell his life as dearly as possible. The Muslims took the city, surrounded the citadel, and began what they believed was the last phase of the siege. In the fighting during the siege, the Persians had lost 1,000 killed and 600 captives, and these captives were later executed on the orders of Abu Musa. Muslim casualties are not known, but are believed to have been quite heavy. As the sun rose, the Muslims began to consider ways and means of tackling the Persians in the citadel. Then Hormuzan himself appeared on the wall and called to the Muslims. "What do you wish? You and I are both in a tight situation. In my quiver there are 100 arrows, and you will not get me while a single arrow is left but will lose 100 men, dead or wounded." "What do you wish?" asked the Muslims. "I shall surrender," Hormuzan replied, "on condition that Umar himself decides my case as he wishes." This was agreed to by Abu Musa, and Hormuzan gave himself up to the Muslims. The Battle of Tustar was over. A large amount of booty was taken, of which 4/5 was distributed among the soldiers, with the cavalryman setting a share of 3,000 dirhams, and the foot soldier 1,000. This happened in about the second quarter of 20 Hijri. End of chapter 17.